To increase support for small businesses and address the challenges they face, the South African Department of Small Business Development plans to introduce a new bill to Parliament that will establish a new state-owned company to support small businesses. The proposed initiative, outlined in the National Small Enterprise Amendment Bill, seeks to create a more conducive environment for small enterprises to thrive and contributes to the country's economic growth. The new bill will allow the departments to establish a new state company in the form of the Small Enterprise Development Finance Agency, which will replace existing entities such as the Small Enterprise Financing Agency, the Co-operative Banks Development Agency, and the Small Enterprise Development Agency. The bill will also see an expansion of the minister's powers as well as the establishment of a small business ombudsman. So this morning, economist Phelisa Nkomo joins me to unpack this. Thank you so much, Phelisa, for joining us.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you so much for hosting me.
All right, talking about this small business in South Africa, we see that over time, in a couple of years, it's been battered by COVID-19. Talk about lockdowns, restrictions, load shedding, disruption to the supply chain because of course, the Russia-Ukraine crisis and other issues that these particular kind of business or a business enclave had to deal with. I'd like to understand how badly hit are small businesses looking at the turbulent periods that they had to go through.
I mean, you're quite correct. In fact, the small, medium enterprises have not really recovered from COVID, even though everyone else says the global economy is open for business. It's open for business, but it also changed the discourse of the nature and the creation of value chain. There are opportunities that got presented by COVID, and part of it is that countries need to start bracing themselves up to ensuring that they build at a national level a resilient economy that integrates small, medium enterprises within their economy. So that part of the multiply effect is that you then integrate your small, medium enterprises into global value chain. And we've seen it. I mean, particularly in South Africa and even in African countries, there was a time where we had to wait for masks because masks were being manufactured in China, or we had to wait for condoms, for instance, because condoms were being manufactured in China. So there are so many of our consumables that gets manufactured in abroad, and COVID is really leaving us with that lesson. But then the second issue that is quite important is the fact that COVID is also it's compelling government, or has compelled government to reorganize the economy differently. And part of it is that, particularly in the African context, and this in South Africa as well, where you have the highest rate of informal economy and small medium enterprises. And that government needs to provide safety nets for that group and make it sure that that group actually gets opportunities. I mean, I know, for example, the International Labour Organization is talking about social security for informal businesses, and also other governments are thinking about what type of incentives that we should actually be creating for informal businesses. Because when you actually think about it, a lot of us are actually connected to the informal economy. When we step out of our offices, where do we see tomatoes before we get into a taxi rank or before we catch a matatu? Is that we see a stall of a tomato, a stall of a onion, a stall of a banana, a stall of an apple, and you can actually start collecting some of your consumables you'll need for your supper as you walk along to go and catch a taxi home or a bus home. And then by the time you get into the bus, you know that you don't have to go into a supermarket because you've actually picked up something from within the informal economy. The third issue, though, where I think the minister has a very clear vision on this one, is actually the fact that what is coming out quite clear is that even though there's a recognition on the exclusion of the small, medium enterprises, and which we actually saw it very clearly during COVID, but what is actually is clear is that we then need to do something for this sector. Because this sector is not only had proven to be resilient, but also it has shown that during COVID, it could actually keep families together, right? I mean, I don't know what happens in other Africa. In fact, I know few of other countries who went in a complete total lockdown. They had to, this sector, the small medium enterprise sector, particularly the food production, had to apply for special permits. And the reason they're applying for special permits is because they did recognize that people will still need to be able to need food, but at the same time, the families unto which this small medium enterprise come from will also need to get some form of an income. So part of the proposal is to really kind of like start looking at and say what type of support we need to provide for the small medium enterprises.
All right, talking about okay.
That the Gauteng government had taken a similar, in one of the provinces in South Africa, had taken a similar initiative some time ago, where it actually developed what we call township economy, what we call bill, which amongst those, it actually gave concessions and exclusive, benefits to the townships. Amongst those, if, for instance, the business earns a certain amount of money as an annual, turnover, they are not going to be compelled to do certain things in as far as regulatory framework.
All right, so I'm talking about support for these businesses. We see that a new bill is set to be presented to the Parliament to establish a new state company in the form of the Small Enterprise Development Finance Agency, which of course will replace existing entities that have not been performing well. Are you optimistic about this particular bill? Do you think it will be able to solve the various challenges and inhibitions that businesses are suffering in South Africa?
Yes, I think look, it's going to challenge a lot of, it's what we call thinking out of the box, right? That's one. That's the first thing. And of course, when you think outside of the box, amongst the key things that you are doing is that there is no predictability, that's one, but also two, sometimes outcomes are actually unknown. That's another issue. But I think the vision is quite clear, because the vision is to really disrupt the organized, conglomerized economy in South Africa, which does very little for business, for small medium enterprises, particularly the black small medium enterprises, who have very little social capital, who don't have very strong networks within them mainstream economy, and without a history of families having run businesses. So most of them, as a result of unemployment and being out of jobs, and all they do is that they just get to survive in the informal sector. So that's one of the things that we actually we think that this bill will do. But also we think that also this bill will also kind of like not only give minister powers, but also it's really going to be able to kind of like set up a clear vision in terms of what is the thinking of the minister in as far as the small medium enterprise sector, but also for South Africa, because I think the vision has really been, very wobbly since the democratic dispensation. I mean, even though the apartheid government supported small medium enterprises, it supported them through finance, supported them through skills development, it supported with several interventions. And I think the minister is starting to borrow from some of those old apartheid thinking that were constructive in building an African economy.
Phelisa, before I let you go, we see that small businesses contribute about 22% to the South African economy and is responsible for the provision of about over 10 million jobs in South Africa, as it were. But then I'd like to find out, for this kind of jobs in the informal sector, it requires a lot of funding to be able to push the operations and see how they can scale up their business module and expand and grow. So do you think that the establishment of this particular agency will help these small businesses have access to funds? Because it's been said that the president created a parastatal, as it were, for the energy sector, a new agency for the power sector, and it has not yielded results. So So they're a bit skeptical about what potential or what positivity this particular agency can bring for businesses. I'd like to find out from you.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I think at face value, you're not likely to say we're going to create 10 more million jobs in addition to what you have. But what you can see is resilience and sustainability of the sector through this bill. That's the first issue. I think the second issue with this bill is also a sense of security for people who operate in the sector, who would know that if we are looking for support for certain to access funds without being subjected into the risk profiling of the mainstream banks, is that we can still walk into an institution that understands our issues. Obviously, the third issue is a massive issue around township economy and rural economy, and that the dichotomy between these two centers and the demands around access to funding is always different. I mean, amongst those is that SME who operate in rural areas, some of them, people can't even put together a business plan. And I think what this state-owned enterprise should be doing is to be able to find innovative ways of collecting data and information in the form of business plans.
All right. Thank you so much, Phelisa, for joining this conversation. Really appreciate you. Now, the proposal by the South African government to establish a state-owned company, according to some economists, reflects the government's commitment to foster an environment where small businesses can thrive and contribute to the country's economic development. So it will be interesting to see how these would impact the small business landscape in South Africa when it is implemented, most especially when that particular agency comes into place. And that's where we end our Business Edge for today. Do not forget that you can visit our social media platforms at News Central TV. You can download our mobile app on App Store and Play Store and visit our websites www.newscentral.africa. My name is Lekan Onabanjo. Do have a blessed day.